Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today I shall be doing a review on the complete 6th season of The Simpsons on DVD. This is yet another 4-disc DVD set, this time containing 25 episodes of the show in total, which aired between the years 1994 through to 95. And this is an absolutely incredible season, very memorable at that, and overall has a great cluster of episodes, a lot of which are really heavily themed around Homer, which I guess is kind of ironic with Homer being the staple of the front cover for this season, as the seasons from season 6 onwards began the character-focused covers, breaking away from what we had from 1 through to 5. And so this is the standard box set variation. There was also a clamshell kind of head variant available in the shape of Homer's head with just a differently kind of shaped sort of package for the season. Didn't really take to those, in all honesty. I used to see them in second-hand stores and they were either always cracked or they just didn't really seem to display that well in my opinion, so I'm glad there was an alternative with the box set style. Overall though, some great Homer-themed episodes are featured throughout, such as Homie the Clown, which is one of my all-time favourite episodes. Homer vs. Patty and Selma, a very touching episode at that, and of course the ever-iconic episode featured there on the front cover being part 1 of Who Shot Mr. Burns, where Homer is suspected of murdering his boss. Definitely some interesting content to delve into in this review. But there's the spine of the box set with Chief Wiggum and Mr. Burns pictured there. Back cover, we thankfully do have the backing card for this one this time around, which I don't often keep, but thankfully I did retain this one, so we have the list of all 25 episodes included there. And for the special features, more or less the same. The Simpsons features on the DVDs are definitely some of the best, if not really the best. A lot of dedication seems to go into these, such as with audio commentaries on every single episode, deleted scenes, animation galleries, multi-angle animation showcases. And then we have some features that are kind of exclusive just to this kind of set, with it relating to stuff such as Who Shot Mr. Burns, with there being a Who Shot Mr. Burns suspect gallery. Likewise with Springfield's Most Wanted TV special, which was quite amusing. Your total runtime is 540 minutes, and the box set is rated a 12 here in the UK for moderate sex references. Here's the back cover with the backing card removed. Very similar imagery on the back there with the episode titles taking prominence. And as we open up the box set, we ruin the illusion of Homer's magnifying glass there, but we have some great artwork beneath, showing the silhouette of Mr. Burns being shot. Then we have Homer there with his mouth quite literally taped shut, revealing a somewhat case file relating to the shooting of Mr. Burns, which we have the episode guide, which we will have a look at momentarily. And then we have images relating to who could have possibly shot Mr. Burns. Likewise with the fantastic artwork on each DVD disc, of which the set is a little bit more compact in comparison to previous seasons. And here is a closer look at the disc artwork, of which we have characters that are perhaps considered to be suspects of Mr. Burns' shooting, with Smithers, Barney, Moe, and of course Homer. And here is the episode guide, or even Homer's case file. I love the extra bits of attention to detail on this particular episode guide, such as the fingerprints on there relating to sort of pieces of Homer. There's the back there with sort of newspaper clipping, Who Shot Mr. Burns? Some interesting bits of artwork on here, definitely one of my favourites for the added bits of detail. Likewise, we have the welcomed, as always, letter from Matt Groening detailing his brief thoughts on the season. Then opening this up further, we have the usual kind of sort of, I guess, menu for what we're about to embark on this season, and then we delve into the episodes. And so, beginning disc 1, we have a very fun opening episode, apart from maybe for Bart, where during a heatwave in Springfield, the Simpsons decide to get a pool, which very much automatically becomes a community pool. And Bart ends up accidentally breaking his leg by falling off the treehouse, and spends the rest of the summer confined to his bedroom, only in a bizarre kind of Hitchcock-inspired sort of Rear Window homage, sees Ned Flanders supposedly kill Maude. Really bizarre Bart-themed episode to begin the season with, but still very enjoyable. Lisa's rival shares an unexpected side to Lisa, that being jealousy, where she is automatically jealous of another gifted student in her class named Allison, and when trying to befriend Allison, she automatically becomes incredibly challenged by someone that is just as good, if not perhaps a little bit more gifted in some areas than herself. And I love the really strange B-plot to this episode where Homer unexpectedly comes across a crashed sugar vehicle and starts stealing sugar from this crashed truck and starts putting it in all the food. A really strange part of the episode, but still very memorable at that. Another Simpsons clip show. I'll be honest, I always find the concept of clip shows to be incredibly monotonous, but I do appreciate this one in particular, mainly for the callbacks to previous romance experiences from the Simpsons family, such as with Marge reflecting back on the episode Life in the Fast Lane. I thought that was quite a fun callback. Homer and Mindy, definitely one of my favourite Homer-themed episodes relating to conflict. And Bart and Lisa recollecting on young love as well, which I did actually find quite amusing, especially for Bart, recollecting on him sort of falling for an older teenager. And Lisa, of course, with poor Ralph Wiggum. That was definitely one of my favourite Lisa-themed episodes for sure. So it's great to see them come together in this compendium of learning from one another about what love really is. Definitely a fun episode to sit back and reflect on. Next up we have Itchy and Scratchy Land, which is one of my personal favourite vacation-themed episodes of the show, where Bart and Lisa convince their parents to take them to the most violent place on Earth, where they encounter varying representations of the Itchy and Scratchy franchise, kind of expands the lore behind the show within the lore of The Simpsons, which I do appreciate the little bits of exposition provided behind the creation of the series within the show. And with an imminent uprising of robotic Itchy and Scratches, with some vague kind of callbacks to the likes of Westworld, and perhaps even to a lesser extent Jurassic Park, we see the Simpsons family stranded in Itchy and Scratchy Land fighting this uprising of robots with disposable cameras. Next up we have Sideshow Bob Roberts, which is easily one of my favourite Sideshow Bob themed episodes, and I feel like I say that phrase about every Sideshow Bob episode, but they are always so very good. This time around, Bob, getting out of prison, manipulates the political system to try and become a candidate for the Republican Party, and he frauds his votes and tries to get in the polls by using the names of the deceased in order to get himself elected. And when Lisa exposes this, I love the trial at the end of this episode, which is easily one of my favourite Sideshow Bob monologues. For sure, one of Kelsey Grammer's best performances as the character.
Is that what you want, you smarmy little bastards?
Next up we have Treehouse of Horror 5, which is for sure one of the most iconic Treehouse of Horror episodes. Once again following the three-act structure, with the first act being a great homage to The Shining, the second being the ever-classic Homer Toaster time travel story, and the third being the school cafeteria staff turning the children into food for the cannibalistic teachers. And then last up on Disc 1 we have Bart's Girlfriend, which is quite an interesting romance-themed episode for Bart, where he is attracted to the Reverend's daughter, and throughout the episode we see that she is quite the two-faced kind of character, playing a very innocent role throughout, but being quite the rebel in secret. Next up we have Lisa on Ice, which expands on the sibling rivalry between both Bart and Lisa, where Bart is picking on Lisa, and suddenly she is seen to be a very gifted goalie, stopping objects from being thrown at her. And so she joins the hockey team, is surprisingly incredibly gifted at this role, leading to the culmination of a standoff, sort of, between Bart and Lisa on opposing hockey teams, which has a very heartwarming ending, and it's definitely an end scene that has stuck with me over the years from The Simpsons. Next up we have Homer Badman, where Homer's actions of greed are taken completely out of context, where he goes to a candy convention with Marge and basically steals as much candy as possible, including the very rare gummy Venus de Milo that manages to make its way onto the rear of the babysitter character, and when Homer goes to fetch it, this is completely taken out of context, thought of as sexual harassment, where the babysitter character fights back against a predatory-style portrayed Homer. Definitely a very conflicting episode, to say the least. Next up is Grandpa versus Sexual Inadequacy, where Homer and Grandpa Simpson team up together to try and sell this old revitalizing tonic that Grandpa has as a Simpson recipe. And it's a really fun episode to see Homer and Grandpa Simpson bonding together while also giving a little bit of exposition to Homer's childhood, which I greatly appreciate, only for this to be torn apart, where Grandpa in a fight turns around and declares that Homer was simply an accident. And I appreciate the metaphor inside the booklet, literally tearing their image apart. Very conflicting yet again for an episode, but brings a lot of heartfelt moments to the table. And speaking of character exposition, we have Fear of Flying, which delves into Marge's past, discovering the root for why she has a trauma and a phobia of flying on an aircraft. Homer the Great is an episode that I used to watch religiously when growing up, and it's still one of my favourite episodes to this day. Seeing Homer struggling with various social situations, trying to be a part of this very secretive cult/group of the Stonecutters, simply to be amongst his friends such as Carl and Lenny, only to face a series of rejections as he struggles to try and actually make it into the Stonecutters. And I love the guest spot character portrayed by Patrick Stewart throughout this episode, a very memorable role at that. And Maggie Makes Free is another episode delving into the past, this time looking at Homer's so-called perfect life, with only 2 children, a phenomenal job working at the bowling alley where he is actually good at his job, where he's actually appreciated for the work that he does. Everything seems absolutely fine until Marge reveals that she is pregnant yet again.
Marge is pregnant?
And so, with budget restrictions taken into account, Homer has to give up this perfect life and return to the power plant. And the end scene where Mr. Burns leaves him with that really awful sign that just says, "Don't forget you're here forever." I love the end twist on that, where Homer decorates it, covered with pictures of Maggie, simply covering up the wording to then instead say, "Do it for her." Definitely one of the most heartfelt endings to any Simpsons episode, and again one that has stuck with me over the years. And last up on disc 2 we have Bart's Comet, which is a very eerie feeling doomsday style episode, where a science experiment goes wrong thanks to Bart pranking Principal Skinner, and as punishment he's told to assist with various astronomy-related activities, only for Bart to accidentally discover an incoming comet that will make impact with Springfield. This is an episode where the formula I feel has never been able to be replicated, and it's certainly one of my favourites for that reason alone. Next up is Homie the Clown, which is a great Krusty and Homer-themed episode, where Krusty is seen to be incredibly careless with his money, and so to earn back some extra revenue to pay back the mafia, he opens a clown college that Homer attends. And I like this episode a lot for the throwaway kind of callback to Homer originally being intended as part of an original plot thread for the show, to have secretly been Krusty the Clown all along, and as the show has progressed, evidently they are now obviously different people, different characters. But I appreciate how this episode is kind of a throwback to that notion, and the end scene with Homer and Krusty performing the bicycle trick is absolutely hilarious. Definitely one of my favourite moments from this season. Bart vs. Australia is a simple enough vacation-style episode to an extent, where Bart and Lisa have an argument about the direction of which the water will turn in foreign countries' toilets, leading to Bart doing some investigatory work calling up Australia for a collect call that results in a charge of $900 that he obviously has no intention of coughing up for. And so, for essentially scamming Australia, the whole family is sent over there to apologise in person, only for this to take a rather cruel turn, in my honest opinion.
$900 dues!
Next up is Homer vs. Patty and Selma, where Homer gets into some difficult financial trouble, and bizarrely turns to Marge's sisters for a quick loan, and struggles throughout the episode being humiliated at their expense because of the loan and trying to hide this from Marge. And I quite like the B-plots of his story as well, where Bart challenges gender stereotypes, going ahead with a ballet class against his will, only to bizarrely enjoy the activity. Next up, we have A Star is Burns, which is a very noteworthy episode for the hidden amounts of detail and depth surrounding it in relation to this series, The Critic, which is a very short lived animated sitcom that lasted only 2 seasons, and is a show that I would personally highly recommend. It's a show that I will be covering on the channel at some point soon, and is something that I cannot wait to delve into in further detail. But relating to this series in particular, this episode was basically just a ginormous commercial promoting The Critic, which is something that creator Matt Groening really didn't want anything to do with. He actually removed his name from the credits of this episode. Likewise, he is not involved with the commentary on this one either. And that is very interesting, in my opinion, that he would be so defiant over something that was, as far as a sitcom goes, really clever, but with it just kind of being shallow to promote something like that in his own successful show. I can appreciate where he's coming from, but definitely worth noting to say the least, and quite interesting for Matt Groening to behave in such a way for sure. But the narrative of this episode is fairly straightforward. Marge Simpson proposes the idea of a film festival within Springfield to kind of promote some tourism throughout. And she writes to Jay Sherman, played by comedian John Lovitz, the main character of The Critic, and asks him to come over and judge the films from the townsfolk of Springfield. Next up, we have Lisa's Wedding, which is a really great sort of what-if style episode, looking into Lisa's supposed future, where a fortune teller teases her with the idea of Lisa discovering her true love. And this episode goes through the notion of what that would be like for Lisa, what the rest of the Simpsons family is doing so far forward into the future, and I absolutely love the creative freedom given to the writers and animators in this episode. Definitely a memorable one at that for certain. Next up is 2 Dozen and 1 Greyhounds, which is a fairly innocent episode with quite a dark kind of sort of twisted ending really to juxtapose that, where the dog, Santa's little helper, is misbehaving at home, getting quite frisky, to put it loosely, and so he runs back to the dog track where he was found in the episode Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, and has puppies with another dog, 25 of them to be exact. And with the Simpsons family struggling really with what to do with so many dogs, Mr. Burns actually steals the puppies, and by the end has visions of creating them into a new outfit. Definitely a bizarre twist, but I love the music number towards the end. Definitely one of the most memorable musical moments from The Simpsons.
Na 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 na. Alright. Sorry, you gotta admit it's catchy.
And last up on disc 3, we have the PTA disbands, where we have both influence from budget restrictions at the school and a maniacal Bart Simpson spreading rumors and talking behind the other teachers' backs, influencing a school strike at Springfield Elementary. Moving on to disc 4, we have Round Springfield, where Bart Simpson ingests a razor-sharp Crustio and ends up in hospital with appendicitis. And while recovering after surgery, Lisa then discovers her idol is in hospital, being Bleeding Gums Murphy from, I believe, episode 6 of season 1, where he was introduced. And Murphy is basically Lisa's idol in music and in jazz. And in this episode, it's very heartbreaking to see him pass away, and Lisa struggling with that reality. The Springfield Connection is one of my favourite Marge-themed episodes, where Marge gets an adrenaline rush from confronting Snake the criminal and successfully detaining him, and then proceeds to follow up an interest in joining the Springfield police force. Loads of great themes are featured throughout this episode, in particular the standard of a female police officer in a male-dominant police squad, and Marge breaking those kind of gender boundaries. I think that's an interesting portrayal for the year this came out, for sure. Lemon of Troy is a fun episode where we see Marge teaching Bart Simpson a lesson about being proud of his heritage of being from Springfield, and this is taken way too literally, where a group of kids from Shelbyville, the neighboring town, steal the lemon tree from Springfield, and out of principle, Bart organizes a small group of the boys to go through into Shelbyville and take back what is rightfully theirs. Really great themes featured throughout this episode. I love the character chemistry, especially for Nelson and Martin. and definitely has some of the most memorable quotes in my honest opinion. And finally for season 6 we have Who Shot Mr. Burns Part 1, the cliffhanger finale, which is an absolutely incredible episode. Very well written, especially with part 2 taken into consideration. There are a lot of subtle, kind of hidden bits of writing implemented into this first part that you may only pick up on having seen part 2 in retrospect, which makes this episode all the more rewatchable, and certainly adds a lot to the villainous side of Mr. Burns. And this is for sure one of his best episodes, portraying him as someone who is completely heartless, with intentions of spiting Springfield and stepping over everyone, no matter the cost, in order to make as much money and profit as possible, when he discovers that Springfield Elementary has struck oil, and so he builds his own oil rig to steal what he feels is rightfully his. And so he goes out of his way to piss everybody off in Springfield, whether it's the school, whether it's the old folks' home, the barflies at Moe's, or even Homer Simpson himself by not remembering his name. I love what this episode represents in the long term, and the finale moments where Mr. Burns blocks out the sun is one of the most iconic Simpsons moments in my honest opinion, and really does add a lot of villainous depth to his character, where he is inexplicably shot by the end, with so many minute moments leading to that finale event, where he collapses on the sundial and it's then left open to interpretation. Who shot Mr. Burns?
Well, I couldn't possibly solve this mystery. Can you?
All will be revealed in Season 7. So that's going to do it for my review on the complete 6th season of The Simpsons on DVD. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, be sure to leave me a like down below. Let me know in the comments what was your favourite episode from this season. Overall, I'd say this was a very memorable one at that, with so many standout episodes and highlights, so it's very difficult for me to choose a favourite. Arguably, I would say Who Shot Mr. Burns Part 1, but I am very partial to episodes such as Sideshow Bob Roberts, Homie the Clown. So many great memorable moments, especially for Homer Simpson in particular. So by all means, let me know in the comments what was your favourite episode or maybe even moment from this season. And for more reviews, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.
Are you threatening me?